The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance is a 10-episode series that debuted on Netflix on August 30th, 2019, and serves as a prequel to the film from 1982 directed by Jim Henson called The Dark Crystal. And to be short of words about what this story is about, it focuses on a planet called Thra, in which all of the creatures on the planet, including the sentient Gelfling, all are connected by nature and to the world itself, which also has some kind of sentience and essence to it. But many years prior to the show's events, a group of bird-like and very conniving creatures called the Skeksis take control over the 7 clans of the Gelfling, and eventually at the time of this series' chronology, they discover that they can harness the power of something called the Dark Crystal to retrieve the essence of the Gelfling and use that essence to elongate their lives, make them feel more powerful. And what unfolds from there is a very morally complex, politically deep, and exciting dark fantasy story that I loved. I've grown up loving the Muppets and much of what Jim Henson's legacy is known for. I wish the guy was still alive today. I'm sure there would have been many other great things we could have seen from Jim Henson, but I'm glad that at least his legacy lives on with the Muppet movies that were made after his passing. And now this, which is a true testament to the amazing creativity behind the people that follow his legacy at the Jim Henson Company, because like the original movie, all of the characters in this show are puppets. There are instances in which they use CGI, yes, because of the type of story they're telling here, but I love the fact that these people went out of their way to put so much money into the production with the cinematography, the visual effects, and of course the very lifelike and realistic looking puppets, at least as lifelike as they could be for fantasy looking creatures. And what they've created here is a show that is not only very technically impressive, but actually is a lot of fun to watch and is a very rewarding sit for anyone who is a fan of the original movie. However, I personally did not grow up with the Dark Crystal film. Both the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth were never Jim Henson productions that my family owned growing up, so I saw them much later in life. And between Labyrinth and the original Dark Crystal movie, I think I preferred Labyrinth more because it's a more interesting story to me. In the original Dark Crystal, I just wasn't entirely invested because the Gelfling characters that are in that particular story weren't really all that compelling to me, and any sequence that involved them was just so dry and boring, and whenever you cut back to the Skeksis it got a lot more entertaining. But thankfully this 10-episode series did not suffer from that problem at all, for we get stories from both the Gelfling and the Skeksis side of things, and both parties have interesting characters that are fun to follow. While the first few episodes can be kind of bogged down by exposition and the necessary character drama that needs to be set up in order for the later episodes to work, I like that they actually took the time to give each relevant character to the story something about their personality that we can relate to, and also realistic character flaws that make them interesting and more grounded. You get the sense that all of these characters were given a lot of thought and care, and even though none of them are deep enough to where you can say that they're like the works of the greatest literature that you would ever know, at least they are given enough depth to where you can see a natural progression from where they are in episode 1 to episode 10, and there is definite evidence here that the writers here cared enough to build out the world of Thra and the mythology that was created in the original movie, but also keep it character focused too. And I think that's very crucial because for a dark fantasy series like this, you'd expect for there to be a lot of action, and there certainly is some, but most of this really is just character-driven drama with political intrigue, racial dynamics, and then tension between different races of Gelfling. There's a lot here to chew on, surprisingly, and I like the fact that this kind of feels like an extension of our own world, just set in a fantasy universe that we can kick back, relax, and enjoy playing out. And since this did seem like it was deliberately planned out as a 10-episode series, none of the episodes really feel like they were filler episodes, even though each episode definitely had like padded content in there to make them each like 45 to 50 minutes each. At least I could tell that each episode had a point in building to the climax that is in the final episode, and each episode just kept building and building with more drama, more twists, and more opportunities for the characters to be put in situations that were interesting and complex. I was highly satisfied by this story, and is easily far superior to the original film in terms of its mythology, but at the same time it honors the legacy of the original film too. Nothing in this series seemed to be done with the intention of having people turn away from the original and solely respect this one. This series is done out of full respect for what Jim Henson and crew did back in 1982, and it's a logical extension of what that original story was, and a good background to the events that eventually took place in it. But if I'm going to talk about this series, I absolutely do have to talk about the production value, because it's insane. This is easily one of the best productions I have ever seen that almost entirely works with puppet characters. And it surprises me because it was directed by Louis Leterrier, and I haven't really liked much of his work in terms of the films that he's made. You know, he's worked on The Incredible Hulk, for example. He's also done Now You See Me. None of his films ever really felt like they were distinctive voices of what his vision was. But I think that's key because I've read a little bit into the production of this series, and he seemed like he was actually gung-ho about getting this financed by Netflix, and he went out of his way to prove why he wanted to tell this story and to give something to Dark Crystal fans that they've been waiting so many years for. And that seeps into absolutely every aspect of this production. The cinematography is excellent. The visual effects are integrated marvelously. A lot of what is shown in this series appeared to be actual sets that the puppets were interacting in. And it's also amazing too that they made action sequences with these puppets work without ever really coming across as cheesy. Again, there were some sequences that had to implement some CGI to make them fully work in terms of what the writers were going for. But overall, they made this gritty, intense, and fun to watch. Of course, the character design is great as well. I mean, the Skeksis, they're iconic creatures. I'm not even really going to comment on that because they're great, and they're as good as they were in the original film, if not better. But I have to talk about the Gelfling, because in the original movie, they didn't really have that distinctive of a look to them. And while this series definitely honors the design of the original film, it was easy to notice that the puppeteers and the character designers actually went out of the way to make each Gelfling in the show look like its own unique creature. There weren't any copy and paste Gelfling. They all looked like they were individuals of their own personality and had distinct facial features to them, and I loved that. They even made distinct choices with their clothing, hair, and their facial features to make them match up with what their personality is on screen, and I thought that was really cool too. It's all sealed by the fact that this is a wonderful voice cast that they assembled for this show. And it's funny because normally when you have a show like this that relies heavily on voice acting to round out the characters and make them believable, you would hire people who are primarily known for their voice acting talent. But this is an A-list celebrity cast full of many talented people who've done work in live action performances, but all of them do extremely well with their voice acting. And let me just lay out for you the amazing cast with just a few examples of who's in here. Taron Egerton, Helena Bonham Carter, Mark Strong, Awkwafina, Mark Hamill, Simon Pegg. Those are all great actors, and I haven't even mentioned all of them that are included in this cast. You can go look up on IMDb and just marvel at the talent that they assembled for this show. But seriously, I love that Netflix went out of their way to put a lot of money into the show to make it believable, to make it fun, and also provide good fan service to the Dark Crystal fans without it really coming across as just cheap attempts at fan service. They did fan service by making a great show that adds on to the lore of the original movie and tells a great story on its own. If you're looking for something unique, fun, and entertaining for your whole family to watch, I would highly recommend The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Sure, it might work a little bit better for people who saw the original movie because they will understand a little bit more of the lore from the outset, but I think anyone, regardless of their history with the Dark Crystal or even the Muppets in general, will be able to appreciate this just because of how good the storytelling is and for the amazing work that was put into its production. With that, I'm giving The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance an A-. As far as an age recommendation goes, I would definitely say it's okay for families, but there are instances in which the violence may get a little bit dark for some of the younger kids. There are very clear deaths that are depicted in this show. I mean, there isn't really anything bloody or gross, but the show does have major characters who die in certain episodes, and some of them go out in pretty violent ways. So I would say that the youngest of children probably shouldn't see this yet just because they might be horrified by some of the things that they might see, especially with the fact that Gelfling literally disappear as their essences are ripped out of their bodies. All in all, I'd say that this show is best for people who are at least 8 years old. Thanks again for watching, guys. I have more content planned very soon, in which I'll have at least 3 more reviews by the end of the month, so look forward to that. If you like this video, though, please like and subscribe. It really does help me grow my content here. And you can also hit the bell to be notified for any videos that I post on here. Feel free to check out my social media pages as well, Facebook and Letterboxd. so that you can find content there that you wouldn't otherwise find here on YouTube. In the end though, thanks for watching as always, and I hope you have a good one.